So we're going to cover the difference between embedding and tailoring PRINCE2. Then we're going to talk about the approach to tailoring and the application and project. So embedding in PRINCE2 talks about the whole organization adopting PRINCE2. So this is where PRINCE2 would be the standard methodology for managing projects. So every project would be required to use PRINCE2. Tailoring is when we take the PRINCE2 methodology and we adapt it to our specific project environment. So that means within an organization, the projects are all different. So I'm making modifications to the PRINCE2 methodology to make it work best for my particular project. So that's the difference. I'm still applying all the principles. I'm still applying all the themes, and I'm still using all of the processes. It's just where there's no guidance from PRINCE2, I can have some discretion as to how I go about it. So for example, I must have a formal change control process, but exactly what that form looks like and what the approval levels are and who needs to be involved is up to me to determine. Okay, so that's what we mean by the tailoring part. You can delegate some authority for approval of those change requests down on one project, but maybe not do it on another project. You would still be following PRINCE2. Okay, so tailoring does not mean straying away from any of the concepts in the manual. I just want to make that clear. Okay, so in different environments, whether we be in a commercial environment, a supplier environment, pardon me, I thought my cold was gone, but I still have a bit of a scratch in my throat. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so regardless of my environment, customization would need to be done for different types. And we're going to talk about some of those different types and how that might work. So there's basically 5 steps to the tailoring process. We first make sure that the principles are applied. So whatever approach we're using, we got to go through it and make sure we have the continued business justification, that we've built in steps to ensure we're learning from our experience, that we have defined the roles and responsibilities and documented them, that we're managing by stages, we're managing by exception, and we're using tolerances, that we're focused on products, so we do product-based planning, and that we tailor to suit our environment. So as long as we're using those principles, we've completed the first step and we're okay. Next, we need to check and make sure that we're applying the themes as they're described. So that's the business case, organization, quality plans, risk, change, and progress. So as long as I'm applying all the themes to whatever approach I want to use, according, the themes as they're described in PRINCE2, then I'm still okay. Now I can adapt the management product. So maybe I don't call the report that I give to the board a highlight report. Maybe I call it a status report. That really doesn't matter. The point is that I'm going to give them a regular report that just gives them a snapshot of what they want. It could be a dashboard. It could be in Word. It could be a text. It could be a PowerPoint. But I'm giving them a regular report. And in PRINCE2, we call it a highlight report, but it's not really important what I call it, as long as I'm doing it and I'm meeting the objectives of that report. Okay, so then I can adapt the products. I can have a different change register, or sorry, not change register, a different quality register in my organization than another organization. We can still both be following PRINCE2 because I'm going to have a quality strategy. I'm going to meet the requirements of a quality strategy as it's described in the manual. Only I want specific information about quality because maybe I've been experiencing some quality issues unique to my industry and I want to track details about that. So I could change my quality register to capture some of that information if that's relevant. I would still be managing according to PRINCE2. I can adapt the roles. Okay, so generic roles are assigned in PRINCE2 and identified for the sake of describing how the principles work, but I can distribute the responsibilities of that role across different people or different actual roles in my organization, as long as I've addressed it. Okay. There's often good reason why I group certain things together, so we'd have to take that into account, but the point being I can adapt the roles, so they don't have to be exactly what's described. They understand that you have unique characteristics and talents available to you. We will be covering this, Christopher, We will definitely be covering your question, and since everyone can read it, I won't read it back, but we'll get to that on the next couple slides. You definitely would need to have a project executive, a senior user, and a senior supplier. Now, those don't necessarily have to be separate people. For example, if my project is about upgrading my infrastructure for IT, and the IT CIO is both the supplier and the customer, then the roles both still exist, but I have a person doing it. That is not the norm, though. Normally, you would have at least those three perspectives in different people. So I need those three people on the board. I also have to have a project manager. That's not something we typically want to see shared. You have to have the role of a support person. However, the project manager may assume that role, and that's really all you need, okay? So you're going to have a quality assurance function that's going to happen outside of the project, but that's external to the project, and so how that happens. You would need a project assurance role, which would also be carried out by default is the responsibility of the board. But if they delegate it, then you might have a separate person doing that. But again, if the board can handle it on their own, then I don't have a separate person doing it. Okay, does that help, Christopher? So those are the minimum roles, and of course, then you've got whatever stakeholders are involved for consultation purposes and that. But in terms of your core project team, it would be those three aspects and the project manager. Colleen, let me just read yours. Yeah, the role that would make sure that if we've agreed we're going to use PRINCE2, the role that would be ensuring that we're using the methodology would be the project assurance role within the project. And again, that defaults to the project board. And if the board can't do it, they would delegate it to someone else, but it can't be delegated to the project manager or any other direct reports. So if it's delegated, if the board delegates that responsibility, they would have to delegate it to a different person. So that could be, that's a probable role that you might have differently. The quality assurance is outside the team, but they would also be making sure that you're applying PRINCE2 if that is embedded in your organization. Does that fully answer the question? Perfect. Okay, so we can adapt those roles, keeping those minimum roles there. The team lead role or team manager is an optional role because on a very small project, as Christopher points out, you may not need somebody else. You may just be interacting with the stakeholders and managing a contractor, so I wouldn't need to worry about it. And then we would adapt the processes. As we saw when we went through the processes, there are characteristics that have to be present, but it doesn't provide you a process flow. It doesn't provide you with the specific activities. It makes recommendations, but it doesn't specifically tell you exactly what you need to do. And it shouldn't, because it varies from project to project. So you wouldn't be able to have it apply to different industries and different market sectors if it was that specific. So that's how that gets managed. That's that laying the technical methodology over top of the project management methodology. The two integrate quite nicely because you have that latitude. So even though you have the methodology, you still have a fair bit of work to do in terms of setting up specifically how you're going to go about the project. So let's take a look at that and how we might look at some of the ways we can tailor it. So we're going to take a look at a business transformation project and how I might tailor PRINCE2 to that environment. So if I were doing, I'm just reading your chat, Christopher. Let me just think about it. I want to reread and make sure I'm understanding. You're conducting a research project. Where I'm having a bit of difficulty is, what do you mean by no customer? I'm going to open your mic up, Christopher. That might be the easiest.
My question is regarding to the essential roles necessary or required for calling it a PRINCE2 project. And yes, I was just thinking as to how little and how small I could go to still call it PRINCE2. So I was using an example of me that would like to do a research project, let's say interviewing stakeholders and then developing a report, which is just for me to advance understanding of a subject. For example, as part of a master's or PhD, then I would be the one initiating the project and I would be the one leading it. I would not necessarily have a business side of it because I am representing the business, and I would also be the project manager.
Okay, so I'm
conflicting.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there because you actually are the customer. So you do have a customer, you do have a supplier, and your your skill set is your business. Okay, so it's not a normal business, but if you're going to take it down to that level of detail, your ability to get work is what you market and sell, right? So you think of yourself as a business improving your knowledge set. So you're both the customer, you're both the supplier, and you're both the business. So the roles are still there. It's just you're performing all of them.
Okay, so I understand that the roles can be put together by one person.
Yes. The roles exist. How they get assigned is up to you.
Okay, so I can still be representing the executive as well as the project manager in this case.
In that case, yes, you could.
Even though they conflict. Or may.
Well, they don't conflict because you are able to represent all of those views because you are all of those views. It just means you don't have to have meetings and discussions about it. The only requirement is, and when you saw some other areas where we couldn't use an external supplier to represent a customer, it's because they were a supplier. Yeah, they happen to be external, but you know, if you take the example of a large multi-organization program or project that may be being initiated, you could have someone who is a customer who's external to your organization who is as well or better adapted to be the representative for you. So it was more about the person being a supplier, not being able to represent the customer interest. So you need the person who can represent the interest. If you are all of those people, you can easily represent all those views and balance them.
Right, so the focus is on roles and less on the people taking on those roles.
It's all on the roles. There are some roles that are not supposed to be combined, like the quality assurance versus the project assurance, and the project assurance shouldn't be being done by the project manager. However, in the scenario you described, don't forget that the project assurance is being done to assure the board that the project is being run according to the plans and everything. Well, you are the project board in your scenario. So if you are checking to see if you're, and I know we're taking an extreme just, you know, to really explore the subject, but because the project assurance is assuring the board, the project manager is running it properly, hey, you know what you're doing. So if you come back and tell yourself, yeah, I'm not really following that aspect of PRINCE2, and you're okay with it, who cares?
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. That has been very helpful.
You're quite welcome. Good. Okay, so let's look at some different scenarios here. So first we're going to take a look at a program scale of a project where we're looking at an overall business transformation. So I might have several projects happening underneath. So if I were looking at the program and I were applying PRINCE2, I would be using the managing successful programs. So PRINCE2 would be used to manage the projects within that. So the PRINCE2 managing successful programs would be able to fit nicely around with the PRINCE2 principles. The two would fit together, I guess is what I'm saying. So then we would be looking at the programs underneath that project. Sorry, the projects underneath that program is what I meant to say. So let's take a daunting project. And it's high risk, it's high cost, it's high importance to the organization, it has high visibility. So I can refer to some of the public sector projects I've worked on, like the Canadian Border Services Agency. If we have illegal goods coming across our border, the citizens of the country aren't going to be too happy. It's got high visibility. It's important for your public safety. There's high risk and high cost associated with that as well. So we have multiple organizations involved. We were working with the U.S., we're working with the Canada Revenue Agency, we're working with some of the other security agencies in the government. It's multidisciplinary because we were using different types of technology. We were incorporating business change. It included developing new systems for administering fees, for calculating risk, and things like that. It was international. So we had multiple delivery stages, because we needed to have close monitoring from senior management from the various stakeholders. We had industry groups involved as well, so we needed to be able to consult with them at each of the stage boundaries and report progress and get feedback. We had an extended board, so we didn't have just the user, the supplier, and the executive. We had other representatives as well. So the project board included an industry representative. It included someone from the U.S. Border Services, and it included someone from some of the key organizations we worked with, like CRA, for example. So we had the extended board. We had team managers who, we called them team managers, but they were actually running independent projects is what ended up happening. And then within that, they had separate team managers. We had project support was a separate role. We actually had a separate project support office, which was the same as a project management office for that project alone. So we had our own project management office for that project because it was so big. There were 12 different teams, or 12 different projects that pulled together in the main part, and then there were some other projects sort of that were satellites off of that. We had individual management products, so each team had to produce their own plans, had to produce their own strategies for some of the things because they were so different. So, for example, the team that was developing the transponder system so that when the trucks drove up, we could automatically identify who they were, pull up their risk profile, and run a risk assessment against them, had very different configuration management requirements than the main part of the team that was working more on the IT and the business process side of it. So they had independent management products. Okay, so that's the daunting, oh my goodness, this is huge. We'll break it down. We'll make sure we get all the stakeholders represented at the right level so they have the right decision-making people at the table. Okay, so that's one way to apply it. So it was, very rigorous. It was very detailed, and there was a lot of red tape, unfortunately, just because of the size of the group and the amount of communications that had to happen. So, for example, one of our teams just dealt with stakeholder engagement and communications and interfaced with all the other teams to find out what was going on. And they dealt with all of the external stakeholders to keep them involved and keep the different various industry organizations up to date, because we were covering land, rail, so auto, rail, air, and marine travel. So there were a lot of different stakeholders involved there. Okay, so that's a daunting. Let's take a look at a normal project. So it's medium risk, it's medium cost, it's important. It has visibility, but it's not like the whole country's going to see us or it's going to make the international news if something goes wrong. We've got a typical commercial customer and supplier relationship. So I may have that relationship between groups within my organization, or I may have an external supplier helping me out here. But it's a I'll do this for you, and then I'm going to get funding in order to cover the costs. And it's running on, say, multiple sites. So I might be a head office, or I might have different locations around the city that I'm working with or around the country. So I'm going to have one or more delivery stages, typically. I'd have a standard board with, the three main stakeholder groups represented and maybe a few others if they had multiple end user stakeholders or multiple suppliers. I might have a couple of additional people there. My team manager as a separate role is optional. So I may have the project manager overseeing all of the staff for the team, again, depending on what's happening. If a lot of the work is subcontracted out, the team manager is actually the contract manager of my supplier. So I'm just managing that person and the overall contract. I can have project support as a separate role, but again, depending on the needs of the project, I may just pick that up myself. Most likely, I would see on a medium-sized project that it's a separate role, at least on, well, I guess it depends on how you define medium. I think if medium is about $5 to $10 million. So then I would see it as a separate role. If you're looking at a few $100,000, depending on how many tasks are involved, it would often get picked up. And when I've done those types of projects, it often gets picked up by the project manager. There may be some management products that are combined. So I might combine I might not do a separate team plan. My team plan is going to be part of my overall project plan for that stage. So I have my stage plan. I wouldn't have a separate team plan for them. I would still be creating work packages to assign to the resources. I might also combine I might not be creating checkpoint reports. I might just consolidate the verbal feedback from my team at my team meetings, take notes, and then produce my highlight report. So those are some ways that I can pull it together. I'm still getting a checkpoint report from staff. I'm just getting it verbally, and I'm still consolidating it from across the teams. Okay, so again, the way that you do it, there's some latitude on, but you still have to do it. So that would be a normal project. So we've got a simple project, low risk, low cost. It's important and visible to the organization, but it's all within the single organization and single cost. I probably have a single delivery stage, which includes my closing process. So I wouldn't have a stage boundary at the end of that. I have a single delivery stage, but as you will recall in PRINCE2, we always have 2 stages. So I'd still have the initiation stage where I'm initiating the project and doing the initiating process, the stage boundary process, and the directing process all happen within that initiation stage. So it's still a 2-stage project, but there's only one delivery stage after initiation. I have a simple project board. I have an executive, or maybe the executive and customer are combined. Those 2 roles could be the same. I have the project manager who fulfills the project support role, and I've combined a lot of my management products. So instead of a business case, I might have a business case / business plan that's combined together, or my project plan. So the textual part of my project plan might be embedded in my business case if it's a smaller project. And then there's the task, and this is sort of what you were describing, I think, Christopher, although what you're describing is probably a bit bigger than a task, but it's, single person. Typically the executive is the project manager or line manager, and normally the task is created. The project manager may also be the person doing the work, and the cost may be within the business as usual budget. So they may not need to secure funding because it's coming out of your operational budget. And you treat that as a work package, delivers 1 or more products. Okay, so you might not have risk registers and quality registers. You may just have a daily log where you're tracking all these types of things, or maybe you are feeding it. It would depend on the nature of the project. So the one that you covered, Christopher, you'd probably just have your own daily log. You wouldn't bother going to a formal quality register and all that kind of stuff. You're tracking all the things you would have tracked in a quality register. You're tracking when you've made changes to things and why, but you're just not doing it with the for lack of a better word, all the red tape and formal segregation. But you're still applying all of the principles, all of the themes, and you're still going through all of the processes. You're still looking at, is it worthwhile that I do it? You're still making a decision in your role with your executive hat on or your board hat on that, yes, it is worth making the investment, and you're going to go ahead and plan how you're going to do the work. So then you would do that plan with your project manager hat on, and then you'd take a look at it with your project board hat on and say, yeah, no, this will work and it's worth doing, so I'm going to go ahead, and you'd give yourself approval to do that. And then you would start the delivery process where you're starting to look at actually doing the work, and then when you get close to finishing one segment of that work, you're deciding, gee, should I go on with this or have I got enough covered? If it was a single stage, or if you've broken it into different steps, you might decide whether it's time to start the next step or not. So you're still going through those stages. You're just not going through them as formally, and you're not going through them communicating with as many people. Okay, so that would be the task level. Does anybody have any questions about this? So things that you're covering are at the size, risk, cost, importance, visibility, how many stakeholders are involved. All of those are things that help you determine how to tailor PRINCE2. Does anybody have an example, like Christopher did, that you'd like to sort of go through and discuss how you might tailor or adapt PRINCE2 to handle it? Now, everybody just wants to get done for today, don't you? I don't blame you. It's fairly straightforward. I suspect if you're already managing projects, you probably intuitively know. Whether you know what the PRINCE2 terms are or not is a different story, but you probably already know a lot of this. Okay, let's take a look at the quiz. Quiz number 1. Okay, anybody else? I only have just over half of you participating. The correct answer is D, which most of you got. So if we're tailoring and looking at tolerances, we're looking at how we're going to manage by exception. Everybody okay with that? We are tailoring the tolerances for the project, absolutely. But the principle is the manage by exception. It's a bit of a tricky one because I can see where you would apply it either way. But the use of tolerances is as far as PRINCE2 goes. So we're not actually tailoring it when we define the tolerances, because it doesn't say, a good range is 5 to 10. If it said a good range was 5 to 10 and we were going to make it 25 on this project, then we would be tailoring it. But all it says is that you need to define them. So that's why the manage by exception is more appropriate. Number 2. Okay, and good work. Just about everybody got this one. The answer is B, the techniques. Tailoring is an integrated element. Just let me show you. I believe the diagram is in the manual. It is the same as the one I have in my document. Just a second, let me drag it over for you. We have our 4 integrated elements of the principles, themes, and processes, and then we've got the tailoring to the project outside, and this is the way it's described in the manual as well. I probably didn't highlight the tailoring enough when I did the review. Sorry about that. Okay, question number 3. You are correct. It is a subset. Okay, and the correct answer is A, of course. And information technology would just be a type of project. You're dead on. Quiz number 4. Okay, and the correct answer here is A as well. Good work, everybody. So to summarize, every PRINCE2 project is unique and delivers a unique result, service, or product. There are 5 steps to the tailoring, which is first to make sure that whatever you're planning to do, you've applied all of the principles, that you've then applied all of the themes as they're described, that you've adapted the management products, as we saw in some of the examples that we did for the smaller or larger projects. You adapt the roles, and then you adapt the processes. So the PRINCE2 methodology can be tailored if the project is part of a program. So it's not just independent projects that can apply. And if you're managing programs according to the managing successful programs, then these are going to mesh together well because they were designed to do so. So there won't be any conflicts there. Okay, so I'm going to read you directly from the PRINCE2. The purpose of the closing project process is to provide a fixed point at which acceptance for the project product is confirmed, and to recognize that the objectives set out in the original project initiation documentation have been achieved, and then in brackets, or approved changes to the objectives have been achieved, and then you close the brackets again, and then or the project has nothing more to contribute. So we're verifying that the objectives are completed that were supposed to be completed during the project, and then we have nothing more to contribute, and the verification of the subsequent objectives would be part of your benefits realization plan. Okay, the slide did not mention the nothing more to contribute on that slide, and that was what was causing me some grief in terms of it sounding contradictory. No, objectives can be impact or as they call it, the outcome. So we produce products in order to enable a business to produce an outcome that leads to a benefit. But the ultimate objective is to get the benefits realization there. So you could be monitoring, if you're doing your benefits realization plan, in your benefits realization plan for that post-project items, you might be looking at, okay, did we achieve the outcome? Because you know that after achieving the outcome, there may be some time before you achieve the benefits. And there's actually a lot to be learned by measuring them separately, so you can better identify where problems are or learn your lessons from what happened in the project. So the objectives can be impact or outcome or benefit and all of the above. It depends on how you described it. And you can call it whatever you want, of course. The point being that we're isolating the product from the result it achieves in the business, because that's you can give anybody a hammer. That doesn't mean they're going to make a good carpenter, is what we're saying. And PRINCE2 is recognizing that and saying, okay, we've provided you the tools you asked us for, and you agreed you could produce the outcomes or achieve the impact with those tools. So we've done our job well, and we've provided you with all the tools, and you've accepted them or you've signed off on the variances. And then we can see if we achieved the impact or the outcome, and then later look at, did we actually get the benefits as a result of achieving those outcomes? Because the outcome may actually cost us money and our benefit realization is that by providing better service, for example, to a customer, we'll give more referrals and increase our business to cover the cost. So I can provide better customer service, but if I'm not getting those referrals, I didn't achieve the benefit. I achieved the outcome, but I didn't achieve the benefit. Yeah, and you know, the reality is in our project environment, at least I find the reality, when I'm in consulting, I'm using different terminology on every project because I'm adapting to what my client wants and how they're used to thinking of it. The point being, does it relate to the principle and the theme in PRINCE2? And if it does, if you want to call it impact instead of outcome, I don't think that's a big deal. For the exam it is, because you're going to want to make sure that you can, you know, demonstrate to them that you know, because they don't necessarily, if you're using different teams, know if you're meaning the same thing or not when they do the exam. Yes, and I'm with you, Christopher. I find because I do the PRINCE2, I do PMP, I do the ITIL, and then the CJIT, and then I've got the change management terminology, and they're all slightly different. So when you get talking about them, it's, yeah, it can be a little confusing at times, but I try to focus on what's the underlying meaning and intent, and if I'm accomplishing that, what I call it, if it better helps me to better communicate to my stakeholders by calling it impact instead of an outcome, who cares? You're following the principles, you're applying the themes, and you're following the processes, so you're good to go. It does not say that you need to demonstrate a benefits review or a warranty period before handing over to the BAU. No, to business as usual. It does not say you should do that. What it says is that you should document what your process for handover is. And if you've negotiated a warranty period, then that should be reflected in your process. So again, it gives you a lot of latitude to tailor it to your environment and still be in line with the principles and the processes.